Thank you. I would love to say good morning, but it's not morning yet. But it's morning somewhere, and that's the point I'm going to make. The first slide that you are going to see is essentially a picture of Troll A. When this platform was moved onto the field, it was the biggest structure ever to be moved on the face of the earth by man. Now, almost 25 years later, it is still the biggest structure ever to be moved on the face of the earth. That platform alone produced 31 billion square cubic meters of gas last year. That's equivalent to an average household of 17 million households in Europe. The total energy needs of 17 million households from one platform alone. That tells you a little bit about the scale, and it's one of the key advantages with gas is scale. Scalability, flexibility, and footprint. Take the next slide. Or do I do this myself? Somehow. There's something. Technology is a wonderful thing. Coming after Ola Borten Moe and Connie Hedegaard and Thomas, it's difficult to make new points, but I'm going to try. First of all, energy needs to be viewed in a context. To me, there are three important contexts. First, energy is a key driver in the economy. In 2011, Herman van Rompuy, the president of the European Council, said that investing in energy policies is one way to get us out of the current economic crisis. In Europe, which we are discussing today, the average GDP growth is around 2.5–3%. In the US, it's a little bit more, coming back from a recession, and China is growing with around 8%. You cannot view energy policies without also talking about economic policies. Second, energy is key to development of human welfare, of more sustainable solutions. Currently, we have 1.3 billion people on this earth that do not have a current and sustainable source of electricity. Imagine that, 1.3 billion. Would you like to spend every day without charging your cell phone? That cannot and is not a sustainable future. And second, the world we're living in now is much more volatile, it's much more uncertain, it's highly complex, and it's filled with ambiguity. That's why we call it the VUCA world. The picture you see here is the development trends of energy, and the predominant trend is not to Europe. It's from the Middle East to Asia. So when we talk about gas and energy in Europe, we need to do it in a global context. I'll give you a little bit of a reason why I say so. This morning, I could buy gas at Henry Hub for $3.85 per billion BTU. I could do the same in England for around $5 per million BTU. I would have to pay around 9 on the Russian-German border. But if I were Japanese and I wanted energy to fuel my power plants, I would have to pay 17.2. I can convert gas to LNG and transport it on water for around 4. That price difference is sufficient to change the energy picture as we see it today. So keep in mind, when we're talking about Norwegian and European energy policies and supplies, we need to keep a global view. It's not working great. Can somebody take the next slide? Why natural gas? There are three key issues. One, it's an excellent complementary resource to renewables, and it has a lot of the qualities that renewables lack. Two, it's plentiful. We have safe deliveries for decades to come. Give you another piece of advice, and I'll come back to that later on. But we're quickly moving from supply restriction to demand restriction when it comes to gas. There are more than enough gas in this world. And second, it is the cleanest of the fossil fuels, and as such, it provides an excellent vehicle to go from the current situation to a renewable economy while sustaining economic growth. Fantastic. So, let's do first. Why is this a natural partner to renewables? You've all heard about intermittency, and I think Thomas did a great job talking about it this morning. One of the key challenges with renewables, particularly wind and solar, is that they change production capacity due to factors that we as humans cannot control. We cannot control when there's wind, and we cannot control when there's sun. So we need a way to mitigate that. Gas can be stored either as line pack, as was suggested earlier today, or in short-term storage, or even in long-term storage in Europe to supply almost instant power when the wind isn't blowing. And the infrastructure is there. The infrastructure is already paid for. It's already existing. And the production capacity is already there as well. And the market is there. This is a fast way to secure complementary to intermittency. Second, just in Norway alone, the reserves left are around 2,100 billion square meters. Troll produces 31 billion square meters. You can do the math. If you look at the rest of the world, and I said energy needs to be viewed in a global context, there is more than enough gas for the next 120 years. Shale gas changed the way we look at gas. And we roughly can say, and if you look into USGS website, you can find that there are roughly 10 times more unconventional gas than our conventional resources. And if some of you are following the energy market, they would say that the Japanese launched a pilot producing methane hydrate earlier this year. There are 10 times more hydrate than there are shale gas. It's a plentiful and safe resource. And then, it's the cleanest of fossil fuels. If you compare, and this is from a report written by Deutsche Bank, if you compare it to an old-fashioned coal plant, you can actually do the same amount of power production and reduce the CO2 emissions by 70%. There are technology demonstrators in this world where the aim is to reduce the CO2 emission from coal-fired power plants using CCS that ends up at around 90. So you're almost at where a coal-fired power plant with CCS is with conventional closed-loop gas-fired power plants. The challenges is in the economy. Coal, plentiful. The most abundant resource on the face of the earth when it comes to energy is coal. Even if I said that there's a lot of gas, there is even more coal. And that means that the price is low. So economies that are struggling, developing economies in recession, they will choose the cheapest fuel because that will give the cheapest source of energy and hence the cheapest electricity to the population. We need to provide an incentive to move away from coal and into a much more sustainable resource. We truly believe that the most effective vehicle is to increase the carbon price and, if possible, make it a global carbon price because these markets are global. I cannot stand here talking about gas without talking about technology as head of technology and research in Statoil. I think it is a paradox that we are trying to transcend from a carbon-fueled economy to a clean economy, while at the same time underspending on research when it comes to making that transition. I would argue that to spend more on utilizing the transfer from the fossil-fueled or dirty economy today to the clean economy in the future is necessary in order to make that transition as smooth as possible. That means we need to investigate into how do we create a flexible power source? How do we link these value chains together? How do we make gas work with wind? How do we create a structure where we can, as consumers, do not necessarily care about where we are getting our power supply for? We just know that it'll be there every day, every morning, for all people on earth. I would argue that we're currently underspending on technology to go from a fossil-fueled world into a renewable world. And what that is doing is that it's actually building up a threshold that we do not need. If we made that transition easier, quicker, more cost-effective, and we at the same time provided an incentive for the consumers to choose a low-carbon fuel, we would make the transitions faster, smoother, and much more reliably delivering on a 450 ppm scenario. To kind of sum it all up, I think that one, we need to consider a global approach to energy. We cannot just look at Norway. We cannot look at the EU alone. We need to have a global focus. Two, investing in technology to make that transition is the key to a successful transition. Underinvesting in technology in the transition phase is probably going to build a bigger hill going from where we are today to where we need to be. And three, I would argue that the case for gas as a natural transition fuel, and if we're successful in CCS from 2030 and onwards, also a part of the long-term solution. But that needs to happen now. It cannot happen 10 years down the road. Then the train has left the station. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.